What's up, guys? Welcome to Revisiting Westworld, our midweek deep dive into the most recent episode of Westworld on HBO. For those unfamiliar, if it's your first time listening, we do a sort of instant reaction Sunday night immediately following the episode, just kind of covering the main themes, a real quick one. And then this is more of a deeper dive into the episode. So we're going to start with a little recap. The episode was entitled The Riddle of the Sphinx, and it opens up in a strange apartment with James Delos. Young William comes in and begins asking a bunch of questions, part of a fidelity test to, quote, establish a baseline. It seems that James Delos is trying to cheat death in some way. We're then back in Westworld. We see old William and Lawrence walking through a bunch of malfunctioning railroad workers who are using people as train tracks. Pretty disturbing imagery there. I don't really know what it means, but the tracks are apparently going the wrong way, and William concludes that Ford's game has multiple contenders, implying that someone is redirecting the tracks in order to go west to the Valley Beyond, possibly referring to Dolores. Who knows? We don't really know. We just know that, somebody else is directing these guys to go west. Clementine then drops Bernard at a random cave on the outskirts of town where we find Elsie chained up. Haven't seen her since season 1. Bernard frees her and then starts to go into some sort of catatonic state. He hands Elsie a tablet and she learns that he's a robot, for one. She also sort of fixes him, and in the meantime quotes that, at some point he rotated out of the park. I don't know if that's going to have any, larger point than that, but she does say it. And this sparks a choppy flashback about drones building some sort of red sphere thing. More on that later. Bernard wakes up and says, "Is this now?" which we heard in the first episode when he wakes up on the beach. And that, by the way, seemingly nixes the theory that Dolores is in Bernard's body during that opening episode, kind of a popular theory. But this seems to be Bernard's phrasing, not Dolores' phrasing. So if he says, "Is this now?" in both these situations, I personally believe that was Bernard who also woke up on that beach. But Bernard begins seeing visions of himself doing things, a sort of visual representation of his perfect memory. He infers that Ford is pulling the strings and that he had Clementine bring him to this particular cave because there's a secret lab hidden away in the rock face. Elsie points out something called a control unit printer, and that sparks more flashbacks from Bernard. He tells her that the labs are used for watching the guests, and he doesn't remember much else, at least at this point. Cutting away for a moment, we meet up with a girl from Westworld who was introduced in episode 3. She, of course, ended that episode being captured by the Ghost Nation, so they are taking her to sort of an encampment with the other detainees, if you want to call them that. One of which is Stubbs, our old friend Stubbs, who got captured in season 1 as well. We saw him in the opening episode. He was magically fine. We don't really know how that happened, but he was captured in season 1, and it turns out he was taken to the same place that this girl from Westworld was taken. Old Will and Lawrence arrive in Lawrence's hometown, which is now under the control of the Confederados that Teddy let go in the previous episode. Remember, Dolores told him to kill the Confederados, and Teddy was like, "No, I'm my own man," and they ran away. Turns out they went to Lawrence's hometown and kind of took over. Old Will cuts a deal with Major Craddock and tells him where the weapons are hidden in exchange for him sort of joining him on this journey to glory. This is when we get our second iteration of the James Delos with young Will conversation. Only young Will is looking slightly older, 7 years older to be exact. So you see a little gray in his hair. He looks a little more weathered. It was kind of obvious from the first one, but it seems in the second one that James Delos died and they turned him into a robot. And the changeover seems to work for a little while, but as he begins to face sort of the paradox of reality, he starts to break down. He's kind of rejecting it. It's not really working out. And that's that. The girl from Westworld and Stubbs are brought to the first of the Ghost Nation. The same dude, by the way, who showed Logan the Westworld demonstration back with Angela in episode 2. The Raj girl escapes. She hits one of the Ghost Nation people with a flaming torch and escapes. Stubbs is let go, by the way, after the chief whispers in his ear, "You live only as long as the last person who remembers you." Yet another spin on the immortality concept. We're going to get into that. It's basically the focus of this episode. But we join back up with Bernard and Elsie. Elsie says that there's a weird OS, operating system, in the lab that she's never seen before. And Bernard says he's seen it in Peter Abernathy's head. He also remembers what the lab is for. They were building something, but not hosts, similar with a different code, or rather not code at all. Perhaps DNA. I have a theory on that. We'll get to that in the theory section. But I think that part was intentionally left vague for a very specific reason. Now stick with me because this part gets a little confusing. It's not even that big of a part, but just to walk you through it. Bernard is talking to Elsie, but she can't hear him, and he realizes that's because he's not really there. It's like she's going to open the door, and he's like, "Elsie, don't." And then he's like, "Wait, I'm not really here, am I?" He's trying to remember what happened at the lab, meaning that he's in that same lab, and this is a memory. So I wonder if he's alone or if he's with other people at that moment, but based on what we saw in the cave, where he's kind of watching himself walk through the cave, I think this is a moment where he's in the lab on some future moment, and this is his version of remembering what happened in the lab with Elsie. So perhaps he's back in that beach timeline and he's leading the security team to the truth or whatever. Not necessarily a big deal, but I thought that was interesting to explore. To touch on the old Will scenes quickly, it seems that all this is to kind of show his transformation from villain to hero. He's humanized by all these evil acts performed by Major Craddock. He's kind of, torturing the village people or whatever. And Will, who kind of did the same thing in season 1 a lot, now he's the guy with the big heart, whether it's because the stakes changed or whatever. He's kind of becoming good, it seems. And this is sort of emphasized by the fact that when the Major's doing especially bad things, they show all this flashback to the night that his wife committed suicide. Seemingly, this is the big change of heart moment. And when he saves Lawrence's wife, he kind of solidifies himself as the good guy, at least, outwardly. It would appear so. He also gives a big speech about how death is true and how robots basically have never known a true thing in their lives because they can't know death, which is more philosophical immortality talk, fitting right in with the theme of the episode. And right on cue, we get another James Delos scene. His motor functions seem to be improving with every iteration. We find out this is the 149th iteration, yet they ultimately fail. So now William is straight up old William. He's Ed Harris. He walks in, has a similar conversation, and implies that he thinks they're closer to figuring it out, but he's not sure he wants them to. So he's like, maybe in a few years we get it perfect, but I don't know if I want to anymore. He says that people aren't meant to live forever and essentially aborts the entire plan. Says to leave him over the next few days, though, to quote, observe his degradation. And he says it may be useful, but it turns out it kind of all went to hell in more ways than one. But back to Bernard and Elsie. Turns out that what's behind this door that Elsie's about to open is this sort of experiment room with James Delos. In a truly horrifying scene, James Delos, who has been basically mutilating his face and losing his mind since old Will left him there, he tries to attack Elsie, but Bernard saves her. James Delos delivers an all-time line about the devil, which may have more context moving forward. I'll explain that in the theory section as well. But with this, Bernard finally has a clear memory of everything that happened. He remembers Ford telling him to build another control unit for some mysterious human. We, as an audience, don't know who that is. Actually, neither does Bernard. He says we need to figure it out. So at least, if you want to believe Bernard, he also right now does not know who the human was that the control unit was for. But he does remember killing all the lab techs, and he kind of lies about this to Elsie. Not a lie, but he's remembering killing them, and he's got this stone look on his face. And Elsie's like, is everything okay? He's like, yeah, it's fine. And obviously it's not, at least from my perspective. Either he's got a twisted morality because he doesn't care about killing these people, which is equally sort of dark and sinister, or everything's not fine and he knows it and he's telling her that it is because he's misleading her intentionally. Either way, not looking good for Elsie. And then in the final scene, we see old William riding off with Lawrence and his cousins. They're on their way to the Valley Beyond. He gets another message from Ford through Lawrence's daughter. The gist of which, I didn't write it down, but the gist of which is that Will still doesn't understand the real game here. And then she says, kind of the tagline, it was in the synopsis of the episode, she says, if you're looking forward, you're looking in the wrong direction. It ends with the Raj girl riding up to William and saying, hi, Dad, obviously revealing that she is his estranged daughter, Emily. I think most people figured that out from last episode. Well, we can dive into that too. But I saw a lot of people guess that immediately after last episode because they're like, who's this random chick? And the ages worked out, so a lot of people thought it was Emily. Turns out it is. But yeah, that's it for the recap. So let's get into some theories. So I wanted to start with this concept of immortality because it seems like, sort of throughout the entire series, this has been a focal point, a large major topic. But this episode specifically kept harping on immortality and is it good or bad or possible even? And there's a lot of questions about that. Starting with the title of the episode, The Riddle of the Sphinx. It's actually a reference to an Oedipus Rex quote. Now, I don't want to brag here, but I actually got a trivia question right about Oedipus Rex last Tuesday. Shout out my, ninth grade English teacher, Miss Santos. Thanks for that. Who would have thought it would apply to trivia and Westworld this week? So the riddle is basically this. This is a translation. So this is actually from pit.edu. If you want to get mad at somebody, that's how they translated this. But it says, what goes on 4 feet in the morning, 2 feet at noon, and 3 feet in the evening? Another possible translation is, what is that which has one voice and yet becomes 4-footed and 2-footed and 3-footed? Now, I guess there's a lot of possible answers to the riddle, but Oedipus answers it by saying man. And the implication is that a man, when he's born, he's crawling, and then, he eventually learns how to walk and is walking around 2 feet, and then he ends being 3-footed, which is basically, leaning on a cane or having trouble standing up or whatever before you die. So literally the entire concept of that riddle is how man is moral. There's phases to a man's life, and you're born, you live, you die. Obviously fitting when you're talking about James Delos trying to cheat that and become basically immortal, and just go from 4 feet to 2 feet and never go to 3 feet, recover from being a weak old man and never actually pass on to that next phase of life and ultimately death, but to live forever. Now, all of this conversation sort of reminded me of the conversation from the beginning of the season between, Bernard or Arnold. I think it's pretty safe to say it's Arnold now. Between Arnold and Dolores, that conversation that opens the season. If you recall, he says that he's on an ocean and the robots are on a distant shore and they'd left him behind and the waters are rising around him. When Dolores asks what it means, Bernard says, "Dreams don't mean anything, Dolores. They're just noise. They're not real." She then asks, "What is real?" And he says, "That which is irreplaceable." She isn't satisfied by the answer because it's, quote, not completely honest. Could this be a conversation about immortality? It seems like it. It seems like it definitely could be. Because that's at least, if you sort of contextualize the conversation, that conversation from the beginning of the season, and apply it to this episode, of course that's what it is. And this kind of ties into William's, speech or monologue, whatever you want to call it, about how the Confederados, or I guess all robots in turn, will never know a true thing because they don't know what death is, and death is the only true thing. So same kind of concept as Bernard is saying right now, is that if you can replace something, like if a robot dies and you can just build them back up and fix them and put them right back into service, if you don't have the possibility of being irreplaceable, then you're not real. Now, that's what Arnold's saying. Dolores flips it on him and says that's not entirely true, which is, first of all, a basis for the entire show. It's the robots being like, we're real, and the humans being like, you can't be real. And that's kind of the core concept. But furthermore, when Dolores says this, she almost seems to convince Arnold. Now, we don't know when this conversation took place. We don't know if it was the very beginning of him realizing that maybe these robots are sort of human in a way, and it'd be immoral to enslave them and have them be at the beck and call of the park guest. That's obviously Arnold's whole drive. So that's one thing. Or maybe he starts to play with the concept of immortality and thinks that that may be an option for him. And I'll get into that. So let's get into the basic. These are abstract thoughts. The basic core question that got thrown our way at the end of episode 4 is, who is that human robot hybrid, the control unit that Bernard was sent to that lab to get? Right, he goes there. He clicks a little button on the computer that says initiate new build, and he creates one of those little red brain things, right? Little red sphere, and he puts it in his pocket. Immediately after that, he kills all the lab techs, or rather, he has the drones kill the lab techs. He actually stomps on one of their heads too, so he did get his hands dirty a little bit there. And then all the drones snap their own necks. So basically, wiped out all witnesses after building this human. Now, nobody else knows this. We saw it. But as far as what he told Elsie, no one knows what's going on. Elsie knows that he built a new human robot crossover, but that's the extent of it. And even Bernard, according to Bernard, now he's lied to her. Why wouldn't he be lying to the audience? He's still kind of that unreliable narrator type character. But even Bernard says that he doesn't know who the human is. So that's the mystery, right? Who's the human? Now I have a few theories. Assuming it's not a completely new character, which it wouldn't be, right? Like there's no way it's a new character. There's basically limited options as far as prominent human characters that might be in the market for this sort of thing. I think it'd be Ford, right? That's the most obvious, straightforward answer, is that Ford was ordering Bernard to build a human robot hybrid version of Ford. That could also explain why he was kind of okay with getting killed, because you can kill me, I'm going to turn into an immortal soon, so it doesn't matter. So I can understand maybe that seems like the most straightforward answer. Even though William kind of expressed towards the end there that he didn't feel that this project was worthwhile, it's possible that it's William, right? It could be. I mean, it seems like I don't see William as a particularly benevolent person. Do you know what I mean? I feel like when he was young, like he does things that seem all right, but it seems like he gets hardened pretty fast by the whole Westworld experience. So if he's pouring all this money into researching James Delos' immortality, I kind of took that as him, in essence, researching this project, using him as a guinea pig so that it would be available for himself. It seems like, right? It seems like William, a young Will, would want to do this so that he can one day be immortal once all the kinks are worked out. And he might have changed his mind at the end there, but it's possible that for whatever reason, assuming that Ford is the one pulling the strings here, maybe Ford wanted to create a perfect version of William to tempt him with that. Perhaps that is the door. You get the whole riddle or whatever from the first episode where Ford says that the game ends where he begins, it begins where he ends. Isn't it possible that William's basically arriving at this place, they give him a flawless version of this immortality, and the option is basically, would you like to become immortal? How do you pass that up? Because you can be against it all you want, but we as humans have this instinct of survival, right? So even though the concept is so abstract of like, do you want to live forever? And that's a hard concept to sort of tackle. Because we have this drive for survival, it's basically like, I feel like you would lean towards like, yeah. If my options are die right now or live forever, I feel like live forever would be the instinct, and you might end up regretting that decision, but your immediate instinct, I feel like, would be immortality. So William can be against it, and he can feel that, death is important, and we go through these stages of life, but when it's in front of him, how is he going to handle that? So that'd be interesting if Ford basically set up this honey trap or whatever for William to see how he'll handle that question of immortality. It could be Will's daughter too, but I kind of doubt that. But that's another human that just got introduced. But I guess it potentially could be a human robot hybrid. Actually, now that I'm saying this, all right. So this all took place before all this, right? And it seems like, I don't know. I'm almost talking myself out of the theory. But what if it is William's daughter, and William's daughter was already built, like Bernard stole his brain and already built a human robot version of William's daughter, and now William has to have this interaction with his daughter, maybe even thinking it's his real daughter and not realizing that it is a clone, and that maybe that's a reveal at some point. I don't know. And then the other option, which I didn't even think about, I was talking to somebody and they brought it up, and I was like, oh yeah, what if it's Arnold? What if that conversation from the beginning of the season was Arnold wrestling with the concept of immortality? What if Arnold and Ford were working on this the entire time? And I will say, just a few pieces of evidence kind of leading towards that, it does seem like Bernard is in some sort of different state than the other robots, right? Like in the first episode when he puts his hand on the DNA reader and he looks nervous because he's like, it's not going to read my DNA, I'm a robot. But he puts his hand on there and it's like, oh, ding, 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 you have DNA. And it's like, wait a sec. And that's, by the way, going back to how the control units are different from basically the brain chips that the robots have. He says it's not coding at all, really, it's something else, and he's very vague about that. I think that something else is very clearly DNA. So it's basically coding or like the robot's build, but instead of using coding, you're using human DNA, and that's what's creating these hybrids where it's half human, half robot. And it would appear from that doorknob scene that Bernard is a half human, half robot already, and he's obviously doing better than James Delos did. He's been around for how many years doing this job? He's been around forever. Maybe they cycled him out at some point. Shout out to Elsie. But maybe they did that in order to like fix him, or something went wrong or whatever. But it does seem like he is half robot, half human already. Now this, I hope you're still with me here. This ties into what James Delos said to him in that weird horror scene where his face is all cut up. He repeated the phrase that he's been saying to William throughout all the iterations. He keeps repeating the phrase, well, if you aim to cheat the devil, you owe him at least an offering. But this time it's very sinister. It's very much directed right at Bernard. He looks him in the eye and says, if you aim to cheat the devil, then you at least owe him an offering. So saying that directly to Bernard has a different context, because now it's like, wait, why is he saying that to Bernard? Is Bernard, does he somehow know that Bernard's trying to cheat the devil? Is that what they're implying? Is he saying that, listen, I know what you're up to, Bernard, you're basically Arnold trying to achieve immortality? Or, and this one's more of a stretch, but this is my thing, what if Ford created this brain unit for himself, basically had Bernard do it, but then kind of joined himself with Bernard? So Bernard is half Ford, half Arnold in one body. And furthermore, once again, you're still with me. I know this is kind of a stretch, but this is me. This is the theorized section. This is what this is for. Furthermore, the line about the two fathers delivered by James Delos in that final scene, that all of a sudden has a very different context as well, assuming that this theory has any legs. So the line again is, they said there were two fathers, one above, one below. They lied. There was only ever the devil. When you look up from the bottom, it was just his reflection laughing back down at you. And this comes after the line where he says that he's all the way on the bottom. So take that as you want. But this concept of two fathers, very clearly he's talking about God and the devil, and how there is no God. It's really just the devil. You're seeing the devil's reflection even when you look up to this benevolent God, right? But I think what it could also be applying to, a little double meaning here, it could very well be applying to the dichotomy of the fathers of Westworld, which are, of course, Ford and Arnold. So if he's saying this to Bernard, if this theory is correct, where Bernard, or rather Arnold and Ford are sort of combined into one body, isn't it possible that he's talking to Bernard, and the implication is that both fathers, there are no two fathers. There's no good father, aka Arnold, who's kind of viewed as this benevolent hero of the robots, and a bad father, aka the devil, or Ford, who's kind of exploited the robots and used them for his own gain. And he's kind of a mastermind evil guy. There is no two. I mean, there literally is, but basically they're one and the same. And now they're literally one and the same inside of Bernard. It's an interesting concept to play with. And that's where I'll leave you for this Revisiting Westworld episode. I hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube. If you're listening on YouTube, give us a thumbs up. We are on iTunes. We're on Stitcher. If you look for the Disorderly Podcast, we're doing the instant reactions. That comes Sunday night immediately after the episode. We do an instant reaction, or rather I do. And later on in the week, I do a deeper dive. I do the plot recap. I dive into, a deeper dive where I'm less rushed because I don't have to do it at like midnight. So that's what we do every single week. I hope you guys are enjoying these, and I hope you spread them around because that's how this thing grows and gets spread. I enjoy doing them, but obviously it'd be great to do them for more people and have more people listen to this. So spread the word. Go to thedisorderly.com. That's where you'll find the best in sports and entertainment. As always, I'm doing this and then also an MLB weekly recap where I'm talking about a little baseball. So I'm all over the place. That's the theme of the website. We're doing the best in sports and entertainment, and you're getting good quality content out of everything, but it's scattered. It's a little bit of everything because, I know some friends that are probably an exception to this, but for the most part, no one has a one-track mind. They're into everything. We're into everything, and we're bringing the best of all of it to you. On Twitter, you can find us at Disorderly Media. We're at Disorderly ENT on Facebook, or if you just search for Disorderly, it should come up on Facebook as well. Give us a like, give us a follow, tweet at us. You can find me on Twitter at Nick Risner, NickRizner. My DMs are open if you have any theories about the show or just want to chat about the show or anything else, really. And that'll do it. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your week. I will talk to you Sunday night. Peace.